How important is critique, revision, and reflection to a project? Hi there again. My name is Mila, and I want to just quickly review who I am with you again. I've been in education for over 30 years. 26 years of it has been within the classroom setting. I'm a consultant and a coach for project-based learning, tech integration, and literacy. And I'm looking forward to continuing our journey in project-based learning in this video. Like I mentioned in our last video, how the different elements of design are really interwoven with each other. And you're going to see that with the critique, revision, and reflection, as well as all the other design elements, that they are really woven together and that they impact and influence many of the different types of learning that's happening within a project, even as you're designing it. So my first question is, do you want the quality of the process and product to be high quality? Yes. Well, I'm assuming you're saying yes. Then you need to critique and revise. So again, I'm lifting the language from the project design rubric. Critique and revision. Students are provided with regular, structured opportunities to give and receive feedback about the quality of their products and work in progress from peers and teachers, and if appropriate, from others beyond the classroom. And then students use the feedback about their work to revise and improve it. I want you to take a moment and think about how even outside of a project, even within your own classroom practice now, how you provide opportunities for your students to critique and revise. So in our project path, you see the project launch, build knowledge, critique and develop, and public presentation. And it ends with reflection and a celebration of learning. You'll see a whole section on critique and development. Okay, so there's critique and revision and developing their project. But if you look carefully, you'll notice the arrow that goes both ways between build knowledge and critique and develop. So the general flow of a project is where after they've launched and they built their knowledge, they're going to get critique and feedback on it so they can develop it more. And then they're going to build their knowledge again and critique and feedback on that. So it's this cycle. And that's what sometimes they call the messy middle of a project, because students are constantly building their knowledge, developing it, getting critique and feedback, developing it some more, and then building more knowledge as they're developing and building their project, getting ready for their final product and presentation. So when I think about critique and feedback, I automatically go to feedback protocols and routines. Part of building a culture, a project-based learning culture, is setting up those routines and protocols within your classroom. Because by teaching and modeling and scaffolding these feedback protocols and routines, you're actually empowering students to be able to give and receive feedback independently. It actually becomes part of their classroom culture. So this results in students not having to depend on you for the knowledge to move forward in their project or to receive affirmation that they're on the right track. So in a sense, you're creating an expectation that they can find answers within themselves and other people as well, going through these feedback protocols and routines. One example of a protocol is a gallery walk. There are many ways you can do a gallery walk. This is one way that I've seen teachers do this, wherever they're if at a certain point within their project, if students have a draft ready, they make it so everyone can see it. Sometimes they leave it on their desk, they hang it on the wall. It can even just be an outline or a storyboard of an idea. And then what they do is it's generally silent, and then the critique of the audience gives anonymous comments, either in writing or in post-it notes, or right on the document itself or on post-it notes. And they use feedback language like "I like" and "I wonder," really to give them feedback on the general content or whatever they're asking for feedback on, or whatever you'd want them to give feedback to the person who has either designed or created the beginnings of their product or presentation. The other thing that you need to keep in mind that, Gallery Walk can also be digital. Google Doc apps are great for that because they have that commenting feature. Another thing that you might want to consider for a Gallery Walk is that you can involve community members to give feedback beyond the classroom setting. That usually is easier when you have it digital because it's accessible to a lot more people, but you can also invite community members in to be part of that learning community where they're giving feedback to the presentation or the product. So Gallery Walk is one example for a feedback protocol. Now, critique and revision tips I'd like to give for this, is to build the language as part of the culture. So the first time that they're receiving critique or feedback on any of their work is not within the project itself. So, for if you're doing writing in the classroom or giving them opportunities outside of a project. So it becomes this language that is normal for your students to use. Scaffold the process. Use sentence and question stems to help students understand the language that they need to be using, how they could be giving some feedback that is meaningful and helpful to students. Teach and model and, a gradual release of ownership. When you do feedback protocols or you do any kind of routine, model it for them, teach it to them, and then after that, gradually release it so students can learn this process and learn it in a quality way. Do often in a variety of ways. So yes, you might want to do a gallery walk, but you could also do a turn and talk in partners, turning and giving feedback, immediate feedback in real time at that moment. Sometimes it's a small move, but that little piece of feedback could really help a student out in terms of their presentation, their product. Now, a charrette is another example that you can have access to, and that resource will be available for you, as well as the tuning protocol. Those are two common ones that are used within project-based learning units, but again, really choose a feedback protocol or routine that is appropriate for your age and grade level. Then another piece of advice is celebrate a growth mindset, allowing students to realize there's always room to grow. So they're not limited to this exact, that they have to be perfect the first time. Now that's going to take some work because many times, especially older students, they have it in their mind that they have to have it perfect, that final draft, the very first time. So again, teaching, modeling, and gradually scaffolding and releasing that for your students will help them realize that they can grow. Again, be honest with it. Allow them to see that you're continually growing as a learner too. And the other tip is, as you're designing and thinking about a project, I want you to allow for revision in your class calendar. Many times teachers will have, I've put critique protocols, and feedback, but they didn't allow for time for students to revise, or they've put the critique protocols and all that at the very end and realize that they ran out of time before that final presentation to allow students to actually make the changes necessary to make the product and presentation better. So the question is, when do you reflect in a project? From start to finish. So when we think about reflection, again, I lifted this up from the project design rubric. Students and teachers are engaged in thoughtful, comprehensive reflection both during the project and after its culmination about what and how students learn in the project's design and management. I want you to just really think about the language that was used in that and what that means to you as a teacher in general. Do you allow for reflection to happen within your own classroom practice now? I shared this quote on our first video. We do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. That piece of reflection is very important for students and teachers. So as you think about it, think about reflections like a punctuation mark. It should actually follow a substantial piece of work. So as you're doing your building knowledge and you're wrapping up one piece of learning, key knowledge or information, and understanding, end it with a reflection piece. Have them think about their learning to help solidify it and make sense of how they can apply it to not only what they're doing in their project, but also in life, in the real world. Examples of reflection in PBL: journal entries, exit tickets. Exit tickets meaning right before they leave class or the project for that time. Ask one question, have them write it down or put it in a Google form. Turn and talk, turning to their partner or their teammates, to talk about their idea or what they learned. Thinking routines. Here are 3 examples. I used to think, now I think. IQ is an acronym for what are some insights they have and what are some wonders and questions that they have from this. The 3-2-1 protocol, 3 things you learned, 2 things that interest you and that you'd like to learn more about, and 1 question. Simple moves just for them to reflect make a huge difference and impact. Now, we mentioned that we wanted at the very end of a project, but I've given you opportunities for those quick moves to ask throughout a project. Now, at the end of a project, I want you to think about how can you reflect by yourself? What did you like about the project design, your teaching practices? What were the strengths of the project, the areas that need to improve? Take a moment to think about the project yourself, because if you were the designer and you are the facilitator for this project, what moves can make it better for the next time? At the end of a project, reflect with a colleague. How did the students grow in their understanding and success skills? What was the most successful part of the project? Share it with a colleague. It might actually entice them, especially if they're not familiar with project-based learning, to join you on that journey. How would you do it differently next time? Brainstorm some resources. What are some things that you would do? And at the end of a project, this is one thing that teachers forget to do, is to reflect with your students, even from kindergarten, those young children, to high school students, secondary students. What were the best parts of the project? How was the driving question? Did they understand it? What advice would they give you? So here's some of the favorite questions for students that I've had a chance to learn from other colleagues. So what was the purpose? You can ask that of students. What was their goal for the week? What was the process? In what ways did they work to meet their goals, or strategies and tools that they use? What supported their learning? What hindered their learning throughout it? What was the main takeaway for the student? Okay. And if not, what are your next steps? What do you need to do differently? And if so, what are they thinking now? I love this final question that you can ask a student. Who did you become? What did you learn about yourself? Okay. I wrote a blog post on, it was called Beyond Icebreakers, Reflective Questions to Help You Build a PBL Culture. I'll include that in the resources. It actually goes through the project path and it allows you to think about the types of questions for you to reflect on as you build the PBL culture in your classroom. Again, I want to say thank you for taking some time with me and to really reflect on reflection and to be self-evaluating as you think about critique and feedback. So again, my contact is at Twitter as well as Pearl Services.